Welcome to Mind and Soul Matters. We're delighted to share with you again another special presentation from a live forum. It is part of a series of live talks organised in collaboration between Mind and Soul Matters and Melville Baha'i Community to discuss issues around mental health in our society. I will leave the introduction of our presenter to Dr. Dina Ashurian, MC of the forum. Enjoy this very interesting and informative presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina, and I'll be your MC for this afternoon. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on Noongar land today and to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and their elders, past and present, and to their cultures. I'd also like to acknowledge our sponsors today. Our first sponsor is Headspace, an Australian non-profit organisation for youth mental health that was established by the Australian government, along with our second sponsor, the Melville Baha'i Community. Today's event is part of a series of mental health and well-being forums where we explore relevant topics with the help of expert panel members. Baha'i communities all over the world are working to engage in social discourses on topics that are impacting our communities and society at large. Now, just to start with some background to why we're here today and why are we exploring youth mental health. Youth mental health in Australia has reached critical points, with rising rates of anxiety, depression, and self-harm among young people. Recent studies show that approximately 1 in 4 young Australians experience a mental health condition each year, a statistic that's been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and ongoing socioeconomic challenges. These challenges for the youth include academic pressure, social media influence, and economic uncertainty. All of these leading to intense feelings of stress and sometimes isolation in young people, particularly those facing additional disadvantages. While mental health awareness has improved, many young Australians still encounter systemic barriers to accessing care, and stigma and a lack of mental health literacy continue to deter young people from seeking help. The Australian government and mental health organisations have responded by increasing funding for mental health services and rolling out initiatives like early intervention programs and youth-specific resources such as Headspace. However, we need a concerted effort for all of us to help educate ourselves to what resources and supports are available for prevention and interventions to reverse this trend of declining mental health in Australia's young population. So, with that background, Amie will present the lived experience perspective and is a youth reference group member at Headspace Fremantle. She is a student at UWA studying neuroscience, physiology, and anatomy, and plans to pursue her studies in medicine. Through her lived experience, she has become passionate about tackling stigmas associated with mental illness and advocating for the well-being of our youth. She has received a scholarship to attend WA Mental Health Conference this year, is a committee member for UWA's Wellbeing Committee, and welfare officer for the UWA Health Student Society. At high school and university, she has organized and helped facilitate Wellbeing Week for the last 4 years. So Amie has not only got lived experience, but she has a lot of energy. So can we please welcome Amie?
Thank you for inviting me here today to share my experience, as young as it may be, and thank you for listening. So, I'm a first-year student at University of Western Australia. I'm probably at the end of the stage of being a youth, so I've got the full journey to share. And I will be talking a little bit about depression and anxiety because I'm mainly going to focus on what I have learned throughout my experiences. So when I was around the age of 14, I experienced depression due to some life circumstances. I didn't want anyone to know because I felt that I would hurt them by telling them I was struggling and that I would burden them by placing my problems on their shoulders. But then people eventually found out, and at first that really sucked because I felt like everybody was approaching me as if I was this weak thing in need of saving. But I'm really glad they became aware because I don't think I would have gotten to where I am today and doing all the things I am doing today without their support. I don't think we were made to suffer in silence. I know Sarah touched on earlier about how we're very sociable beings and we like to be in groups, need to be in groups. So even though it was really hard to have other people hear about my problems, I am so grateful for it because they were able to support me and I was able to feel like I was part of some sort of bond where I could be connected and supported. A few times in my life, I've also had people who needed support, but they didn't want to talk about it, much like how I didn't want to talk about it. And this can be a very scary situation to be in, which is why I wanted to talk about it today. I'd also like to stress, though, that you're always a family member or a friend. You're never a psychologist unless you are actually a psychologist. And even then, there's a reason why psychologists can't give therapy to their family members, because then some lines get blurred and you kind of taint the special relationship you already have with that person. If you're always unsure what to do, it's best to ask. The youth, we were still people at the end of the day, and we have a lot of strength within us because of our human resilience. So it's always best to ask for advice of what to do. Throughout high school, I continued to struggle, but as I got older, I became more comfortable with being vulnerable. I think it's very important to be vulnerable about our struggles because not only can other people learn from it, but it gives you a bit of extra strength to know, oh, I got through this. Not only did I get through this, but I can talk about it and I can communicate about it to other people. This culminated in me creating this thing called Wellbeing Week at my high school, which was a time dedicated to bringing awareness to youth mental health issues and raising money for places like Headspace Fremantle. The stigma associated with mental health and mental illness has been quite poor for some time. I'm sure you can think of one or two movies where there was a person who said mental illness and they were regarded as someone who's on the outskirts of society, who can't function properly, who needs constant care. I've come to this philosophy that I don't believe I'm that person for my struggles. I believe I'm actually stronger because of it, which I know sounds kind of strange, but once again, it gives you a newfound sense of strength because you have this thing that you're going through and you know that you can get through it, and so you can find some sort of power in that. And also it's very good to reflect on your experiences because I know when I eventually become a doctor, I can ensure that I have empathy in my practice because I know what it's like to be in those positions. But even with this newfound belief, I still struggle from time to time, as we all do as human beings. It's been about 7 years since I first really started having problems. And earlier this year, I started getting really frustrated because of that. I kept thinking, oh, I've done the therapy, I've done the mindfulness, I've done, the walking, the yoga. Why isn't it working? But growth isn't linear. It's ups and downs. That's just how life unfolds. There's always going to be something that you can grow and learn from. And I do think if we never had any challenges ever, our personal growth would be quite stunted. And I'm not sure how great we would be as people then. We just got to keep trying, and our ability to be resilient is powerful and shouldn't be underestimated. I did have to learn my limits though. When I say keep trying, that includes trying to rest. It also includes thinking of well-being strategies like scheduling in time for fitness, nature, hot baths, whatever it is that keeps you nice and relaxed. And these aren't just for people who are struggling or for when you're struggling. I think this is important for everyone. As I said before, life can be very uncertain at times, and I think it's important to have time dedicated into your schedule just to relax and to be and to reflect. So despite these consistent challenges, I'm really proud of where I am today. And I know that if you do feel like you're in a position with what I've been talking about, you're capable of so many things, even with the barriers in your way. And I chose to come here today because I wanted to spread that message and also encourage vulnerability, because I do think the mental health stigma is a part of why a lot of youth feel a little bit scared to reach out because they're worried about what their parents and family and friends are going to think of them. And we all have flaws, and no one should feel ashamed of it. So, yeah, thank you for letting me share a bit of my story. And I hope the little pieces of advice I learned along the way can be helpful. Thank you.
It's always so nice to have a lived experience person share their story, and it puts a lot of what we hear from the other speakers into perspective. So thank you so much for your courage to share your story with all of us. So friends, that sort of ends the formal section, and now I'm going to open to the audience for any questions that you might have for any of the panelists.
My question is regarding social media. I guess it's part of all of our lives, and in particular our youth. I just want to know your perspective on what you think as parents, how we can navigate that to get the best outcome for our youth.
Yeah, social media kind of sucks. I mean, I don't think it's like this evil force, and let's be honest, it's kind of a part of everyone's life now, especially like as a young person. I remember when I was 15, and Mom will remember this too, I was like, I want Instagram, all my other friends have Instagram, why can't I get it too? Because yeah, like I do understand the importance of placing limits, but you do feel that FOMO as you were talking about before. But at the same time, when I actually managed to download TikTok without my parents knowing. And when I did do that...
They know now.
Yeah. And when I did do that, that definitely was not a good thing for me, because when I was going through that tough time I mentioned before, the algorithm is so sneaky. Like, it will show you things to keep you onto it, because that's its goal. That's how it makes money. And if you're in a bad place and you kind of just want to stay in that bad place, it's going to show you things to stay in that bad place, and that's not good at all. So yeah, I do think it's definitely important to place limits on social media use, but to also understand that it's kind of intertwined into our life, and you've got to figure out a way to balance staying a part of, like, not necessarily the trends, but keeping up to date with, like, I don't know, news, or just being in the loop, but also like not doom scrolling for hours on end, or looking at things that you know are going to make you feel terrible in a couple of hours.
And then the online friendships never replaces the face-to-face friendships. There's something about being in a room with someone, engaging with them. There's this energy in the room when you're with someone. I know this now that I do telehealth psychology, and I can compare it to being in the room with someone. It is completely different. So it should never replace. And I think for some teenagers who have very severe social anxiety, it has been very positive in that they have found connection online. But we also need to be able to help them develop some skills to socially connect in person. They can develop that skill. It just takes time, and it can be really hard. So we never want social media or online friendships to ever replace the amazing connection that happens in terms of relationships and positive relationships.
I know I'm not on the panel, but I've got a lot of feelings about this. Just this idea that it does become a really big topic in the homes of families that have youth. And I think the first thing is that I think we need to make sure as parents that we don't make it a tug of war where it's you versus me, but it's us working as a team versus these companies that are just trying to keep you on there. Because the kids will try and turn it into a tug of war of, I want this, you want this, let's battle it out. But it's like, no. We're actually on the same team. We're looking at the problem over there. And then the other thing is that with this new age turning 16, I think the fact that the government is legislating about it, the conversations that I've had with the kids is that it's no longer a question mark over whether this is a problem. When the government legislates on something, it means that the evidence is really compelling. So no longer do we need to wonder whether social media is harmful to our children. It definitely is if the government is making legislation across the board. It's not like, oh, for this child it's not helpful, and this child it is helpful. It's across the board. It's actually very harmful for our youth. And the last point I was going to make, which is in relation to something Jay said about it takes a village around this social media, is that my daughter was invited to go away for a weekend. And this mum, who is a school friend, said, I'm actually going to ask all of the kids to leave their phones in a box for the entire weekend. I want them to have real-time experiences, and I want them to not be just looking at their phones the whole time. And it was incredible how all the parents were so on board with that idea. And it was just like somebody just had to be a leader in that, making a stand. Like, we all want to, but we're all afraid of, oh my gosh, what's going to be the backlash if I say something like that? But when you realize that if the whole of the parent community comes together, and there's a number of evidences of it around the country, like anecdotal stories have come up on my feed because I'm very interested in this topic, but where mums have come together and decided this is not good for our kids. And we also don't want our children to be isolated and not have a way of communicating with their friends. But if we all band together on it, it actually can really help the kids to get through this really difficult time. Anyway.
Can you tell me, when you were going through the difficult times, what were some of the strategies that people around you, what did they do that made
To
you
support?
Yes,
Yeah.
support you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it was really a learning experience for everyone because it kind of happened somewhat out the blue. One of the things that I remember being really important was having a place where I felt safe, where I felt heard and listened to, and not feeling like I was pressured into like immediately getting better. Like, I remember I felt really guilty for feeling bad because, as I said before, like I felt like I was burdening everyone around me because I wasn't well enough. And I know that the people that I love, obviously they're going to want me to be well because, I mean, they want me to be happy. But sometimes that can be communicated in a way where it feels like I feel pressured to get healthy. And then that kind of is not the greatest because it's less support and more like more of that burden that I was talking about before. So yeah, one of the really important things was, as you said, like first, like being listened to, like being completely listened to, and then like gently encouraging potentially going to therapy or other things that might work out depending on the person, but not in a way where it's like, you got to do this. This is not good because it's not good and you need to get better. You don't need to hear that. And that just kind of makes you feel worse for not already being that. So yeah, that was something that I found really helped during that period.
I'd like to say a very big thank you to Headspace for co-sponsoring this event along with the Baha'i community of Melville. Thank you to our expert panelists and the organizing task force.
If you found today's episode useful, remember to share an episode with a friend and follow Mind and Soul Matters on your preferred podcast platform and on social media. Look forward to your company next time on Mind and Soul Matters.